we ended up being in a relationship for 22 years, which unfortunately was loveless because neither of us understood what being in a loving relationship actually meant. And
It is a sex-positive body worker who practices tantric massage, sensual massage, conscious kink, and also works with archetypes. David, welcome. I am excited to speak with you today.
hi, Tatiana. Really good to see you again.
You've shared with me previously that you've had quite a transformative journey taking you from an Irish Catholic upbringing to this world of Tantra and conscious kink. And I'm just curious to hear if you could share a little bit about how that journey has unfolded for you.
Well, I was born in Ireland in 65 and lived there until 76. When I was 11, my parents went to, as a family, we went to England because there was no work in Limerick in Ireland at the time. And there was good work in England. And that transition was very challenging for me because I didn't want to go to England. I was raised in a working class Irish background where we sang songs about the English being the enemy. England was a very far away place, very confusing for me. I resisted it. And my life, I had the experience of my life going from one where in the city of Limerick, I could go from the very center of town to the very edge of the city and into the fields, looking for bits of wood to make bows and arrows out of, and go and investigate old castle houses. And had that incredible freedom where my parents had no idea where I was or what I was doing from one end of the day to the next. And it was all fine, to living in a very concentrated, small home where I was afraid to go outside of the house. And that was unfortunately a bit of a pressure cooker situation because my parents were quite full-on alcoholics who were working, but working really to support their drinking habit. And the next number of years, I grew. I did the 11 plus exam a few days after getting off the boat coming to England in the last year of primary school. I passed that test and went to a pass school, a grammar school, but felt incredibly alienated from it the whole time. So the next number of years of like 5, 6, 7 years of growing was a super challenging, difficult experience for me. And I think really I came into adulthood poorly formed, with a very poor sense of personal identity, terrified of intimacy, terrified of connection with others in any kind of boy-girl romantic sense. And when I went to university, I was able to form friendships, but again, intimacy was fantastically challenging for me. The only time where I had anything could be remotely described as an intimate experience would be with a lot of alcohol, and it wasn't fun or good. And then I had a very strong, very good friendship with a woman in my friendship circle, and we mistook that friendship for the beginning of love. And to try and make a long story not too long, that became a relationship where we lived together in London, and then we never got married, but we ended up being in a relationship for 22 years, which unfortunately was loveless because neither of us understood what being in a loving relationship actually meant and required of us or enabled within us. And that was a tough experience for both of us. So I left that relationship in my late 40s, about 12, 13 years ago now. And my question on leaving that relationship, having lived with years of shame for having sexual desire, not knowing how to articulate it, how to own it, and feeling in the context of that relationship that was certainly unwelcome. I remember my question to myself and the world was, where's the pussy? Because that was the only way that I could understand what it meant to have the possibility of being a man in the world, was so reduced down to the other, to the feminine and the woman, to being that part of their body. I had no other way of articulating what my need was. And for the first time in my life, I was on my own. Every other point in my life, I was living in a home with my parents, halls of residence with university people, and then shared home, and then living with my life partner. It was the first time I was on my own. And I had the possibility to decide on each day how I would answer that question. And what it meant over the last 12 years is going to so many retreats and workshops and talks with everything to do from Tantra to BDSM to breathwork to authentic relating, anything that was in this space of what does it mean to be a human being alive, feeling passion for life, wanting to understand the other intimately, emotionally, and also sexually. And that's where I went on the adventure to find out what it means to be alive. So when I left that relationship, I left because I knew if I didn't, it was an awful experience for both of us. So I can only express it from my own experience. I felt that I was living half a life and diminishing. And now I just turned 60 a few months ago. I feel like I am living such a full life that is day on day continuing to expand and offer me new possibilities.
Mhm. Wow, it sounds like you were really hungry to go out and just grab life and have all these experiences after 22-year relationship, which is a long time. I'm curious, what was the turning point after 22 years for you when you decided enough was enough and you were leaving?
Um, my life partner and I, we began the relationship as really strong friends, really, really good friends. And I still feel sad for the loss of that. Um, and when we were trying to understand what does it mean to be in relationship, it was very important for me for that to have a strong physical component, but it wasn't welcome, and I didn't know how to represent it, and I felt shame when I tried to, because I wasn't articulate and I didn't own my desire. I didn't understand. I couldn't express my desire in a way that felt authentic. I think I conflated the ways in which the negative of the masculine being demanding or aggressive in intimacy and how that's so often in the space of discourse. And I felt somehow that my shame was infected by that. And so I couldn't find a voice to represent my need for intimacy in a way that felt true. So I participated in the shaming of my own desire. And I would try very often to speak with my partner about that. How can we find a way that this can be a loving relationship? And there came a point about 4 years from the end, 4 years from the end, when one of these conversations that had happened many times, I had a moment of realization. I can still see the moment in the kitchen, and I can see where my partner was standing in the conversation. I can feel the energy we had in that moment. And just like it was like a light coming on in my head. This will never work.
Mm.
It's absolutely out of the question that this will ever change things to live the life that we're here to live.
Mm.
And in that moment, I knew this must end. And so from that, and that was about 4 years from when we did finally part, because no, I'll pause there because I'll talk for hours if you let me. You should ask a question or something because I'll just go on and on.
Yeah. Well, yeah, keep the answers fairly succinct so that we have
Yeah.
time to cover more ground. But at the same time, if you feel there's something that you want to expand on, that's also fine as well. So once you actually left the relationship, do you remember what were the first communities in Tantra conscious kink that you joined, or the first practices that you did?
The very first thing I found was when I went to Meetup and I saw an event organized by One Taste, which was an orgasmic meditation talk. And I researched what orgasmic meditation was. And for anybody who may not be aware, the One Taste orgasmic meditation is a 15-minute partnered practice where two people will create a nest of cushions together, and one person who's the giver, who needs to have an index finger, will stroke the clitoris of the receiver, who needs to be somebody who has a clitoris, for 15 minutes. It's not a sexual act. It doesn't become anything else. And it's a very stationary, apart from the movement of the stroke of the clitoris, there's no other physical movement. And it is time to 15 minutes. So I saw a workshop promoted to give people awareness of this and how it takes place in London. And I was astonished that there could be something that would allow me to come that close to a woman in that intimate a setting. And the reason it was so powerful for me was because the life that I'd had and the adolescence that I'd had, I had no idea, absolutely zero idea of how to approach a woman that I might be attracted to express my attraction and interest and curiosity in a romantic way. Impossible for me, because I was so afraid of the feminine. And so the idea of being able to go to orgasmic meditation workshop and meet someone and have this experience, like, what? Are you serious? This really happens? And I was like a kid in a toy shop. It's just wonderful and exciting. I can remember the buzz I felt when I was first going. So yeah, that One Taste and orgasmic meditation was my first community that I explored.
So quite eye-opening. So let's
Yeah.
skip forward now to the work that you're doing currently. And you wear a few different hats. You're a tantric massage practitioner, you work in conscious kink, you're a coach, you run workshops. So how do all these different offerings weave together?
Yeah, good question. So I lived in London for a long time, and about 4 years ago, I started, because my day job, which is working in climate change and agriculture online, I don't need to be located in any one particular place. I just need to be in Europe, basically European time zone. So for the last 4 years, I've been traveling, living in Berlin in the summer, and South Europe in the winter. But I've managed to establish in the UK a set of clients and attracting new clients through the Tantra Link website that promotes Tantra massage people. And so I have a regular set of clients that I see every 3 months, and new clients when I go back to London. And I'm looking to expand that service now to Berlin and other places in Europe. So that's the body work of Tantra massage. But I'm also doing coaching online, and I've been doing further coaching training, life coaching, executive coaching. But in this field, the coaching I'm most excited about is erotic empowerment, which is my translation of the essence of Tantra as I've understood it, and the way that it's affected my life and changed my life and people that I've seen around me. And that's two things. It's the erotic, which is the core of our power, but it's also the empowerment that allows us to take that energy forward in the direction that we choose, that's going to make the life that we want to live. That's the erotic empowerment. And it's been fantastically significant for me to come to be living the life that I'm living now. And also the masculine archetypes and the hero's journey has been so important to me. When I was struggling with the life of not knowing who I was, and really every day just wondering why live, what's the point of me being here, I had no framework that allowed me to understand what the meaning was. And I find that the masculine archetypes, the feminine archetypes, and the whole archetypal theory, but also the hero's journey, is a fantastic frame for referencing where I am now, what's going on, why does it matter, who cares, what direction should I choose. It's it's a beautiful framework for testing why we go through the day, I against.
So do you have some clients that will go from one modality to another, or do you tend to keep them separate?
People often will come to me in the first instance for Tantra massage or a conscious kink session. Usually the people that will come to me are new to this world. And once they, when I do Tantra massage, it's a 3-hour session. So typically we'll have the first half hour of having conversation. And so finding out what the person is arriving with and what their intention is, and what is it they're hoping for, and what's alive for them in this moment. So that the physical experience, when we drop down into that, has more depth, more meaning. And then I usually try to protect the last half hour of the session for integration and what might have come up. Has anything emerged? And what I also do is through that kind of therapeutic conversational aspect before and after the body work, that's an opportunity for people to discover, well, depending on what might be coming up, is there something else that might be in what I offer, or what I might be aware of that's elsewhere out there that perhaps I don't do myself? So I might refer people to others that I know who might be doing breath work or something else that I think can help them. So it does expand. So sometimes I have clients who come just for the Tantra massage experience, but then convert onto the erotic empowerment coaching.
So you mentioned conscious kink. For anyone listening that hasn't heard of conscious kink or are not sure what it is, would you just explain what conscious kink is?
So conscious kink is something that is in the space of what we might call BDSM. And BDSM is has more words than letters. So it's bondage and domination, and domination and submission, and BDSM and sadism and masochism. So these are kind of strange things for many people in a mix, and they can represent kinds of taboo type behaviors. So I would say for myself, and I think this is a really common thing in society, we often live in a way that our possibilities are constrained in ways that we're not conscious of, because there are narratives in society that tell us what is right for us and what is not right for us. And many of these attitudes we have without realizing just how they got there or how embedded they are in us. So I believe for a very long time that BDSM was something that was not right for me, even though I didn't know anything about it. I had no idea about what the experience was and what it would feel like, but I knew enough to know it wasn't for me. And when I had my first experience through training to be a conscious kink practitioner, my eyes were opened to the feeling that I would have in my body. And the key thing about BDSM standardly out there, we can't call it mainstream because it's not part of the mainstream world, but compared to conscious kink, is that people who engage with BDSM can have motivations which aren't necessarily in support of the journey of the other. They might be self-serving, and that's okay if people consensually go into a BDSM connection for their personal selfish reasons. That's okay. In conscious kink, there's much more of a consideration that we're all on a journey and we're supporting each other on that journey. And the conscious aspect isn't just that we do that with an awareness of our transformative potential, but we also do it with no drugs, no alcohol. So it's very sober, and it's very, very concerned that consent and boundaries are fully understood in the dynamic of what's about to take place. And what this does is, in the conscious kink space, is create a very safe space where an experience could be had that could be very deep, very powerful, but because it's approached with an intention that is supported by both people, and then after the experience, there is a continuing engagement that we may call aftercare, the integration of that experience, so how the dust settles after the intense experience is something that is supported. These are some of the characteristics of the conscious kink experience I would draw out. These ways of being kinky and behavior can happen in the mainstream BDSM space, but they're not necessarily expected or a part of the identity of it. So conscious kink really owns these characteristics.
Mm. And I did not know that BDSM was 6 words. I always thought it was just 4. So I have learned
I was
something
trying to
new.
remember the B and the D and the D and the M. They have like partner things. So the
Mm.
sadomasochism, there's the S is sadism, but it's also submission.
Yeah, so I've learned something new, but it makes sense.
Mm.
So when you talked about the erotic empowerment coaching, I'm just wondering how you think that's different to just normal coaching or a normal therapy session, for instance.
Mm. So um, in standard coaching, what we'd have is probably asking the client, what is it that you feels alive for you today? What do you want to work on? What do you think the problem is? Where would you like to be at the end of the session? What do you want to take away? And there's different ways and techniques of getting into that, but it could be anything. It could be something at work, at home, relationship. With the erotic empowerment, I take inspiration from, if we think about the archetypal theory of the lover. The lover is sometimes we might feel, we're thinking about romantic love. That's part of it, but really the energy of the lover is living life with full enthusiasm. So being able to access our passion for being alive, and the energy of that is something that we don't often encourage, or we don't know how to access, or perhaps in our lives it happens if we have something we really enjoy doing, we bring ourselves to it, then maybe we can access it if we go to a certain place. Like for some people, it might be a football match. For other people, it might be the theatre. But that enthusiastic engagement with life is available to us any time we choose. When we're taking a walk, when we're with somebody that we love, when we're taking a moment for ourselves, we can actually access that energy. It's available to us. And that's the core of what I relate to as our eros. And by being able to access that, we can escape what is often the trap of the endless rumination of, why is my life not what I want it to be? Why am I not able to be successful? What does it mean to be successful anyway? Or should I be going for this promotion at work? Or how are all these different dynamics playing out? When we return to our core and what actually lights our fire, that is when we can have the possibility of discovering what is really meaningful for us, what is really true. And when we can access that, then the question comes up of, okay, how do we now take this awareness, this developing self-awareness for our self-actualization, to now be in our power? How do we make the decisions to let the world know, this is me, this is what's right for me, and this is the direction I'm going in?
And you've mentioned archetypes now a few times, so I'm just wondering if you could tell us what the main archetypes are, and indeed what they are, and what role they play in erotic and relational work that you do.
There's a lot of work out there, and tons and tons of books on archetypes. Ever since Jung crystallized archetypal theory, he built on the work of others, Carl Jung, in the early 20th century. But so there's many different views on the archetypes, and the one that I feel has a lot of resonance now is the idea of king, warrior, magician, lover. And these are 4 archetypes which offer a framework for relating to, what does it mean to be a man? What does it mean to be masculine? And the question of being in our masculine is one that is relevant to anyone, regardless of the body that they're living in, because we all have the potential to be in the masculine of the king, the warrior, the magician or the lover, and equally with the feminine archetypes. So there's a lot of frames for this as well, but one that I really like is the archetypes of the feminine being mother, maiden, crone to represent the different life stages of the woman, but also queen, priestess, lover, and I forget the fourth one. But those feminine archetypes and masculine archetypes all offer a different way of being able to relate to our possibilities in the moment. So if we feel perhaps I'm struggling with prevarication and having a difficulty of just getting things done, we might acknowledge that in that moment, the warrior archetype in us is the energy is low. So how could we invite within ourselves for our warrior to become present, to become more strong, to actually recognize the quality of discipline and how it serves us? We might be waiting around a long time for motivation to come, but if we make a conscious choice to be disciplined, that's calling in the warrior energy and can support us to have a more sense of meaning for why we act.
And is there an archetype that feels the most alive for you right now?
That's really interesting. I felt for a very long time that the lover archetype was one that I was completely out of and not able to live my life with full enthusiastic connection. And that over the last number of years, that's really changed for me. So I was living my life, I would say, in what they call the passive shadow of the lover, which is, if you think of the active and passive shadow of the archetypes, the active shadow is when there's too much of the archetypal energy. And in that situation, we are being aggressive with the archetypal energy in order to serve our ego. And when there's a passive shadow, that's when there's too little of the energy. So I lived my life for many years with not enough lover energy. So I was living my life in a series of grays. It was very difficult for me to feel enthusiastic or joyful about anything. And the work that I've done and been part of in the past number of years has changed that completely. So now when I engage with a project or work, or I'm working with a friend, or we're doing something together, or I'm with my wife, Andrea, who I adore, we are doing something with passion, with a fullness of life, which allows us to be in the moment and not worry too much about things that have happened in the past or being afraid of things in the future, which takes us away from the moment. So it enables us to focus on that period of time of being really alive. And that's where the erotic, that feeling of really being alive in the moment comes in.
And it's wonderful to hear your journey of transformation and just how much you've grown over the past few years. And on that journey, last 12 years was Tantra. I'm curious to hear, what have you learned about Tantra as your journey has unfolded?
Oh, where to start? I used to be afraid of rejection. I used to be afraid of hearing no, and that would be the most important reason why I wouldn't even ask a question. And that was the case in many places in my life, and it was most especially the case when I was out of the relationship or before I went into my long relationship. If I saw a girl or a woman I was attracted to, I wouldn't even approach because I felt I knew already they would not be interested. And I had a lot of fear. And one of the things that I've learned is that my fear of rejection was actually serving my ego. And in the archetypal terms, it's too little of the lover energy. So why would anyone love me? I couldn't bring an answer to that question. But when through Tantra and related work on authentic relating, and also many workshops or experiences of looking at the wheel of consent, talking about consent and boundaries, having communication with others in practical workshop experiences, of hearing others describe their passion, their desire, and learning that it's okay to say no. In fact, it's important and necessary to say no when something is not right for us. It's important to recognize that and accept that in the other, because we can't communicate and we can't discover what is right for us unless we honor the no of the other. What we learn, and this is a super interesting process and transition, because when this was first explained to me, I heard the words and I understood them because I understand the language we're speaking, but it took some time, maybe some years, for me to really take into my body that when I hear somebody say no to me, they're not rejecting me. What they're doing is they're saying yes to themselves.
So you're embodying those principles more now. It sounds like it's not just a logical concept. It's more,
that's right.
You feel it.
I feel it. When somebody says no to me now, I suggest something, I offer something. What do you think? Should we do this? Would you like to do this with me? They say no. I say thank you. Because it's not right for them. And I want them to have the outcome that is right for them. So they say no, great. It means you're saying yes to yourself, whatever that is. That's great. That's really great. So there's no space for me to feel, oh, I'm disappointed because I said no. And maybe I was looking forward to it. But that also means that when I approach a possibility of something with someone, whatever it is, I also approach it in the way that this could go either way, and I'm not invested in which way it goes. Because if the person's a yes, great, we're going to do that. If they're a no, it's also great, because I will be with myself that I now really enjoy being with when I didn't in the past, or there are so many other possibilities. So the space with this is a liberating. The appreciation of the no of the other is very liberating in many ways. And one of them is that when we actually find we get an enthusiastic yes, and we're proposing something that we have enthusiasm for, that's where we want to be. That's where we want to be with the other person. The last place we want to be is with someone who's given a reluctant yes.
And so you're talking about consent and saying yes and no. And I imagine some people listening might be thinking, well, this isn't the sort of the idea that we had about Tantra. So I'm curious to ask you, what are some of the misconceptions that you think that are out there about Tantra that have been cleared up for you on your journey, if there are any?
Yeah, well, I would say that Tantra as a original spiritual tradition within Hindu in India is an entirely, mostly separate and different experience of intense religious, devotional behaviors of yoga and diet and discipline that people would embark on for many, many years. And the Tantra that has come west has done so in many different forms, some which try to carry forward some of those original aspects from hundreds of years ago in India as they understood them. But often, I would say, Tantra has become a kind of, in the West and in the UK, where I've experienced it, a kind of loose term to band together different alternative ideas around how to live a more successful life in intimacy and connection. And so lots of trainings around authentic relating, consent and boundaries, discussion of desires, practical bodywork techniques have all come together under a kind of loose Tantra heading. And I feel that Tantra's, as an idea, as a concept, has been kind of colonized in order to serve a need in modern day UK in the West for a rejection of old values, maybe patriarchal values of how intimacy and monogamy and romantic life should look like. A lot of people have felt that's unsatisfactory and doesn't meet their needs. And somehow from the 60s and 70s, this exciting, exotic idea of Tantra has been colonized to represent something that's emerged more in response to a need in the West, sometimes with flavors of the original Hindu Tantra. So I've done Tantra training in London, and there would be a lot of work, for example, on the chakra system for meditation and visualization of how the different energies of the chakra system in our bodies can give us the possibility of discovering energetic ways of being. That's a stronger Tantra type experience, which for me, I always had a greater experience of making progress, I would feel, in the relating aspects that were available rather than the religious or more high spiritual type practices. And I think you probably know more about that side than I do, Tatiana.
Yeah, and that's an interesting summary. It's a good summary of it. Thank you. I want to ask you now a little bit about the workshops that you run. You run something called Butt Slam, which sounds like a really fun name. How did that workshop come about?
Andrea and I, about a year ago, were at a retreat that had a temple play space, and that was a lot of fun. And then around 4 o'clock in the morning, there were still a few people left, and the music was still playing. And Andrea was resting, and I was sitting beside her, and the music that came on felt kind of fun. It had a percussion rhythm, sort of tribal beat to it. So I checked in with Andrea. I said, I want to spank your bottom to the rhythm of this music, and she was cool about that. And then I did that, and it was really fun to smack her bottom with this music and just following the beat and being playful with it. And I got into a flow. I got into a flow of really joyful, playful spanking on Andrea's bottom. And I think that lasted about an hour. And it was certainly an experience of flow for me. And then I thought, okay, it's probably time we should probably get to bed. So I asked Andrea, I said, are you ready to move? And she was in such a deep state of relaxation, awake and aware of where she was, but in a really, really deep state of relaxation that it wasn't, she didn't want to move. So we were just remained where we were for maybe another 10 or 15 minutes. And then slowly she was able to come out of it. And we talked about it afterwards. And Andrea said that she had the experience of being in subspace, which for people listening who may not be aware, subspace is a altered state that people who are in a submissive position in a BDSM or kink connection through domination submission practice or impact play or bondage, the person who is the submissive, who's receiving in that context, can drop into what's called subspace and experience deep relaxation, deep surrender, feeling of peace and timelessness and floatiness. And Andrea was saying that as a result of the rhythmic spanking that I was doing on her bottom, she was able to drop into that space. So that was fun. And then a couple of weeks later, we had the idea to try that at home. And we had the same experience. So we did it for, I'm not sure, maybe an hour and a half. I felt flow from enjoying completely dropping into the music, which flow is also an altered state where we experience just total focus on the activity that we're doing. It means everything else drops away and we don't think about anything else. And time seems to slow down and we become fully immersed in our activity. I was experiencing flow and Andrea experienced subspace again. I thought, oh my goodness, we just accessed that again. This is really interesting. And then we went to a burn weekend, which is the burner. People who go to Burning Man often have communities in countries where they organize weekends in their home countries, and they call them a burn. So we did that with 150, 200 other people at a Berlin burn in a castle in the German countryside back in March. And these burner events are all pretty much voluntarily put together, and they're based on gifting and co-creation. And so we offered to put on a workshop for, we couldn't think of a name, or we're still not super happy with Butt Slam, but we haven't come up with a better name, so that's what it is. And we put on a Butt Slam workshop, which was in a temple space that was created by some amazing people called Temple of Lika. So it was the most beautiful, crafted temple space of curtains and colors and textures and cushions and so on. And there were about 30 people there, maybe in 15 or give or take pairs. And we did the actual drumming part for about an hour, and it was the most beautiful, beautiful experience to witness everybody being part of this. And ever since then, back in March, we've been bumping into people who were at that workshop, coming up to us saying how much they loved it, and still talking to their friends about it because it was such a nice experience. So this is Butt Slam that we are actively looking for opportunities now to bring to the festival scene in Europe next year. We're going to be in the Canary Islands from October for the winter, and we're planning on delivering Butt Slam in Tenerife, in Berlin when we return, and also through any festivals that we can get in touch with the organizers and persuade to give us a slot.
I love that story of how it's just organically come about and emerged. And it sounds like a really fun offering.
Yeah, yeah.
So, thinking ahead then for the future, how or where do you see your work evolving over the next 5, 10 years or so? Do you have any plans? Obviously, you're talking about the Butt Slam workshops. Are there any other retreats or offerings planned that will be coming up?
So Andrea and I plan to work together, and we're both going to be expanding our coaching, our one-to-one coaching work. So Andrea does archery coaching and embodiment coaching, and is currently working full-time in Berlin. And I'm working 4 days a week for my day job. So what we're going to do over the next year, 18 months, is we're going to reduce those commitments to take on the one-to-one coaching more, and also to do the workshops at festivals and also in different cities, Europe. Mainly, I think it'll be Berlin, London mainly to begin with, but anywhere where we can see that there's interest in the community we also do another workshop called Embodied Archetypes. So that's taking everything that I'm offering around the hero's journey and the masculine and feminine archetypes, and merging that with the embodiment work that Andrea does, so that people can come and experience that. And what does it really feel like when we talk about priestess energy? What does it feel like in our body when we imagine ourselves in a situation where that energy is relevant, or the queen or the king or the lover? And so that's we want to take both of these workshops and then bring this beautiful work to the world.
Yeah, beautiful. It sounds fun, and I hope that it just keeps expanding. I've got the last couple of questions. The first is, if you could give yourself, your younger self, one message about intimacy and sexuality based on what you know today, what might that be? One bit of advice.
An interesting question. Don't be afraid to ask for what you really need.
Can be a difficult thing to do. And for anyone struggling to ask for what they really need, what tips or advice might you give them?
Never give up.
Love that. Don't give up. And finally, is there anything else that you would like to share or talk about that we maybe haven't covered today, but you would like to bring into this space?
I'm not thinking of anything except to say thank you, Tatiana, for doing this and making it possible for people to be more aware of their possibilities. I spent a long time in the long relationship that I was in. I didn't have an awareness that I had other possibilities. So I was living in a self-maintained, narrow space. I wasn't aware that I could create a different life for myself. The thing I mentioned earlier about believing that I knew nothing about BDSM, nothing, except what society will sometimes pin to it as a judgment. But I thought I knew enough to know it wasn't for me. So if I was to say anything, I would say to all of us to have this awareness. If we have an awareness that there's something out there and we think we know enough to know it's not for us, maybe have a little bit of curiosity to go a little bit further into that assumption or that self-limiting belief. Just take a walk in the garden of whatever it is, because we might be surprised.
Give it a go. Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. Anyone that's interested in David's work, I will leave a link to his website, synchronicities.co.uk, below. And yeah, thank you so much for joining us. It's been really interesting and insightful to hear about your personal journey, but also about the work that you do. And I feel like I've learned a lot about the different archetypes and conscious king and the other things that we've been talking about. Thank you.
Thank you, Tatiana.
Bye.
Bye.